we have to read page 476, but in experience we find, okay? He is discussing the reality and the unreality of the physical world and is examining all the possibilities, the theoretical possibilities, whether it is the seer who is seeing wrong or who is seeing in the wrong way, or whether it is a scene, the world itself that is not real, or there is a problem in the instrumentation of knowledge. So these are the three things he is going on seeing. So let's read. So who will read? One of you has to read. Maybe today Sunki can read. But
Yes.
yeah. But in experience.
Okay, but in experience, is it? I'm sorry, I got the wrong page.
476. 476.
476. Yes. But
But
in experience, but
yeah.
in experience, we find that for us it is normally a quiescence that brings in the stable realization of the eternal and the infinite. It is in silence or quietude that we feel most firmly the something that is behind the word shown to us by our mind and senses. Our cognitive action of thought, our action of life and being seem to overlay the truth, the reality. They grasp the finite but not the infinite. They deal with the temporal and not the eternal real. It is reasoned that this is so because all action, all creation, all determining perception limits. It does not embrace or grasp the reality, and its constructions disappear when we enter into the, the indivisible and indeterminable consciousness of the real. These constructions are unreal in eternity, however real they may seem or be in time. Action leads to ignorance, to the created and finite. Kinesis and creation are a contradiction of the immutable reality, the pure uncreated existence. But this reasoning is not wholly valid because it is looking at perception and action only as they are in our own mental cognition of the world and its movement. But that is the experience of our surface being regarding things from its shifting motion in time. A regard is self, superficial, fragmentary, and delimited, not total, not not plunging into the inner sense of things. In fact, we find that the action need not bind or limit. If we get out of this moment cognition into a status of cognition of the eternal, proper to the true consciousness. Action does not bind or limit the liberated man. Action does not bind or limit the soul. But we can go farther and say that action does not bind or limit our own true being at all. Action has no such effect on the spiritual person or purusha or on the psychic entity within us. It binds or limits only the surface constructed personality. This personality is a temporary expression of our self-being, a changing form of it, empowered to exist by it, dependent on it for substance and endurance, temporary but not unreal. Our thought and action are means for this expression of ourselves, and as the expression, it is as the expression is incomplete and evolutive, as it is a development of our natural being in time. Thought and action help it to develop, to change, to alter, and expand its limits, but at the same time, to maintain limits. In that sense, they are limiting and binding. They are themselves an incomplete mode of self revelation. But when you go back to ourselves, into the true self and person, there is no longer a binding or limitation by the limits of action or perception. Both arises as expressions of consciousness and expressions of force of the self operating for a free self-determination of its nature being, for self-unrolling, the becoming in time of something that is itself illimitable. The limitation, which is a necessary circumstance of an evolutive self-determination, might be an abrogation of self, or distinction from self, from reality, and therefore is self unreal if it is altered, if it alters the reality or totality of a being. It would be a bondage of the spirit and therefore illegitimate if it is obscured by an alien imposition proceeding from a force that is not self, the consciousness that is the inmost witness the and creator of our world existence. Or if it is constructed something contrary to the being's consciousness of self or will of becoming. But the essence of being remains the same in all action and formation, and the limitations freely accepted do not take from the being's totality. They are accepted and self-imposed, not imposed from outside. They are a means of expression of our totality in the movement of time, an order of things imposed by our inner spiritual being on our outer nature being, not a bondage inflicted on ever free spirit. There is therefore no reason to conclude from the limitations of perception and action that the movement is unreal, or that the expression, formation, or self-creation of the spirit is unreal. It is a temporal order of reality, but it is still a reality of the real, not something else. All that is in the kinesis, the movement, the action, the creation, is the Brahman. The becoming is a movement of the being. Time is a manifestation of the eternal. All is one being, one consciousness, one, even in infinite multiplicity. And there is no need to bisect it into an opposition of a transcendent reality and unreal cosmic Maya.
Yeah, very big para, but essentially what he is saying again is that even when you are in motion, okay. So to understand this paragraph, I think we should go back to the image of the sea and the waves. It becomes very interesting. Normally, we are human beings are on the surface of the sea. So we see the ripples, we see the things floating up, we see waves, but we don't see the calm, quiet, deep sea inside. Inside the deep sea, when you go down maybe 1 mile or even more, there is absolutely no movement. I'm not saying that in the physical world the sea is like that, but our symbolic sea, okay, is absolutely calm and quiet inside. So Sridhar is saying it is always the sea, whether you are on the surface or whether you are deep inside, it is the sea. If you are on the surface, you see the movement and the action. Constantly he is referring to a static condition and a movement. So when the movement ceases, there is another image that we can give to understand to ourselves to understand. Okay. When we are disturbed, when someone shouts at us or we become angry, there is a huge disturbance in the being. Okay? Our mind is goes violently, all sorts of thoughts occur, our vital is disturbed and goes here and there. Now compare this to action. Okay? This is the action. ठीक है, it's all right, I don't bother. So this is action. So when there is action and when there is disturbance in the being, you can consider that all action is the physical world. So when you are disturbed, okay, can we be calm and quiet and see correctly? We can't. We can't think logically and we can't also do what is necessary rightly. We are disturbed condition. So this is what means. If you keep this an idea, then we will be able to see. So if I have to do the right thing, I have to calm my mind down and I have to calm my vital down. Okay. Sometimes Even when one is angry, I have seen people, the body starts trembling. In other words, there is action in the body, there is action in the vital, and there is also movement and action in the mind. There is instability. So if that is there, we are incapable of seeing the reality, which is calm, quiet, and deep inside. So, but essentially, whether you are on the surface or whether you are deep inside, you are in the sea. That's what Sridhar is saying. Essentially, it's the same. But if you are up, then you don't see the reality. When you are down there, you don't see the movement. But it's essentially the sea. In any case, it is possible for us to go deep down into the sea and be calm and quiet within, but continue to act in the physical world without disturbance. This is the experience of the yogi. He can make his consciousness either in the self or in the psychic being where everything is calm and quiet, and we can continue to work in the physical world. We can eat, we can sleep, we can go to work, we can even perform operations. Okay, all this we can do with clarity, because now there is no disturbance. There is action, but no disturbance. This is what Srimad is saying in this para. So if you keep the two images, it becomes very clear what he is saying. The first image, the sea, the surface waves, and the deep, non-moving stability inside, deep inside the sea. Okay, and deep inside is either the self or the psychic being. More the self, because psychic being also there is calmness and quietness, but it is mainly the self that is like that. Okay, and also the movement of mind is thought, and disturbed mind is definitely something that does not allow proper thinking. Therefore, you can never come to a right conclusion. Similarly with the vital. And as I told you, sometimes I have seen people, when they get angry, there is actually a trembling in the body. Okay. Maybe you have noticed yourself. If any of you have got the habit of anger, you will see that. Okay. I can tell you that I used to get very angry. Okay. Now I don't get so angry, but sometimes I do. But when there is you feel a vibration in the body itself when it is very, very strong. Okay. So this is what Sridhar is saying, that both are possible without disturbance. You can station yourself very calmly and quietly inside, and outside you can continue to work, and your work will be perfect. It will not be wrong action. This is basically what he's saying. And he is referring again to the famous shloka from the Isha Upanishad. Na karma lipyate nare. The karma does not bind man to ignorance. In other words, when you are working in the physical world with your body, with your vital and your mind, there is no necessity of ignorance. It does not bind you down. You can be free. Your consciousness can be free and can continue to work in the physical world. Okay? With this background, we'll start reading now the para. Because we have to understand the words he's using. I've given you the gist of what he's saying, but we will go into the... So, I'm reading each sentence. Okay? But in experience, not in thought or not in theory, but in experience, when our consciousness goes to the higher mind, okay? In experience we find that for us it is normally a quiescence that brings in the stable realization of the eternal and the infinite. When our mind becomes calm and quiet, when our vital also becomes absolutely samatha, there is no liking, disliking, there is no movement at all, then you can see the reality, and that reality is eternal and infinite. You don't see the finiteness of everything, you see the eternity and the infinity. That's the real, okay? You are in a consciousness where you can experience the deep sea, okay? The image of the deep sea is a little confusing because deep means you have to go down, but in spiritual experience you have to go up. Your consciousness goes up to the higher mind level. Okay. So, in experience, we find that for us it is normally a quiescence that brings in the stable realization of the eternal and the infinite. That means to say, your mind, there should be no thoughts and there should be no violent emotions in the vital, mainly in the thought. And when you go up, then you can see the reality which is eternal and infinite. I am reading the next phrase. It is in silence or quietude that we feel most firmly the something that is behind the world shown to us by our mind and senses. The world is shown to us by our mind and our senses. Note interestingly the accuracy of language which Ramdu is using. The world is shown to us not only by the senses but by the mind. You remember we have discussed that many times, but you can see the accuracy of Ramdu's expression. It's not the world is, he's not saying the world is shown to us by our senses. Normally we would say that. But no, it is mainly the mind which is interpreting the data of the senses. Okay? If the mind goes on a holiday, your senses are giving you images, but there is no interpretation. And the physical world seems to be only images without interpretation. That is equal to unreality. Okay? That's what Shenvi is saying. So, it is in silence and quietude that we feel most firmly the something. Why is he saying something and not saying specifically? Because that something is featureless and ineffable. You can't speak about it. Because when you speak about it, you have to describe it. And when there is nothing to be described, how will you say anything? So that's what they use the word something in English, or sometimes they use the word that. Okay? Just with a T cap. There's no other expression you can use. The infinite is that. In Sanskrit, you have tat. Okay, so in fact, all our mantras start with Om Tat Sat. Okay, it is. That's all you can say. Om Tat Sat. Okay, Tat Sat. Okay, so now I go to the next phrase, or rather sentence. Our cognitive action of thought. Now, what is that? Our cognitive action of thought when you are thinking. Cognition is the process of thinking. Okay. Cognitive action of thought, our action of life, emotions, okay, and being seem to overlay the truth. In other words, your thoughts and your vital emotions and being. Also now very clearly, Srabda is saying being means he is using it for the sense of the body. So your body's actions, vital actions and mental actions are actually overlaying the truth. In other words, so long as you have thoughts and so long as you have emotions and you are active normally, okay, you will not see the truth. They seem to overlay the truth, normally, the reality. They grasp the finite but not the infinite. We see all the limited things in the physical world, stones, trees, cats, dogs, human beings, events, everything we see, but you will never see the reality. It does not. So they deal, this is a normal action. But Srinath is saying that it can be otherwise also. Okay. When does that happen? When the thoughts become pure and not impure. Okay. When your mind becomes, inner mind becomes silent and you are not identifying yourself with your mind and vital and body, then it is possible to act in the physical world meaningfully without any confusion, and yet your consciousness is calm and quiet. Okay? So, our cognitive action of thought, our action of life and being, so action of thought, mind, action of life, emotions, and being, body, seem to overlay the truth. They seem to cover up the truth. They grasp the finite but not the infinite. They deal with the temporal and not the eternal real. The temporal is everything in time, okay, and space. Then now he is saying it is reasoned. This is some people thinking this way, that it is reasoned that this is so because all action, all creation, all determining perception limits. Okay, limits verb. Okay, all determining perception. In other words, determining means giving form, giving very clear, specific form. Determine. Okay, so determining perception, that perception which makes you see forms. Okay, it limits you. That's what Swami is saying. The word limits is not a noun, huh? It's a verb. All determining perception limits. It does not embrace or grasp the reality, and its constructions disappear when we enter into the indivisible and indeterminable. For your consciousness, there is the constructions disappear. The constructions of what? Your mind. Because the mind is giving the constructions of the data from the senses is interpreted, and those interpretations are constructions. So they disappear. Why? Because the mind has become silent and has gone on a holiday. It says, I am not going to interpret anymore. Then let the data keep coming in. I don't mind. I can see thoughts, I can see emotions, I can see actions and everything, but I'm not going to give interpretations. So it becomes like a baby who is seeing all the, he is hearing, he is seeing, he is tasting, and he is also touching, but he understands nothing at all, not yet, because the mind is on a holiday. It has not started working. Okay. They grasp the finite but not the infinite. They deal with the temporal and not the eternal real. It is reason that we read just now. It is reason that this is so, because when somebody is saying it is reasoned, it's not the truth. It's the mind that can say that, oh, because all action, all creation, all determining perception limits. That is why it happens. But that's not true. Huh? It does not embrace or grasp the reality. And its constructions disappear when we enter into the indivisible and indeterminable consciousness of the real. These constructions, so the constructions are clear. The mind is constructing thoughts. Okay, the vital is constructing images. The vital substance creates forms of unrest, forms of jealousy, form of envy, form of desire, form of liking, form of disliking. These are all forms, constructions. So, however real, they may seem to be in time. So when you make yourself calm and quiet in status, all these constructions, they disappear. They seem to disappear. They become unreal in eternity. However they may seem to be, so they may seem to be in time. When you are in time, they are real. And when you are in the timeless, they seem to be unreal. Okay? Action leads to ignorance. There you are. Because, as we said, when there is action in the mind and when there is action in the vital, you don't see the reality. You are ignorant. You can't act correctly to the created and the finite. Yes. Action leads to ignorance. It leads to the created and the finite. Kinesis, that is movement. Okay, movement of any type, and creation are a contradiction of the immutable reality. Who is saying this? Not Sri Aurobindo. Be very careful. He has started the sentence with, it is reason. So that is going on. Huh? So, action leads to ignorance. Sri Aurobindo is not saying. It is reasoned by those who feel that way. Action leads to ignorance to the created and finite. Kinesis and action are a contradiction of the immutable reality, the pure uncreated existence. But this reasoning, now Sri Aurobindo is speaking, but this reasoning is not wholly valid. Partly valid, because it depends on, if you are in the physical world, it is valid. If you are not in the physical world, your consciousness has gone up, it is not valid at all. Because it is looking at perception and action only as they are in our mental cognition of the world and its movement. But if you go beyond the world, if you go outside your body-mind life, that's not true anymore. But that is the experience of a surface being. Surface being, you are floating on the surface of the sea. You are not going deep inside. Okay? That's the experience of surface being. Reading things from its shifting motion in time, a regard itself superficial, fragmentary, and delimited, not total, not plunging into the inner sense of things. Note the language, not plunging into the inner sense of things. If you want to see and understand the sea, you have to go deep into the sea. Okay, inner sense of things. In fact, we find that action need not bind or limit. A yogi who is after karma yoga or even jnana yoga, when his consciousness enters into the static condition, the body mind life continues. Okay, so but you are absolutely in a consciousness which is calm and quiet. Okay, so in fact, we find that action need not bind or limit. If we get out of this moment cognition into a status of cognition of the eternal proper to the true consciousness. The true consciousness is either in the psychic or in the self. So, lose your identification with body mind life, which is the surface, and go deep inside or above. Okay? Then you will see the action. And then you can continue to act correctly. Your action will not be wrong. Action does not bind or limit the liberated man. This is absolutely from the Isha Upanishad. Na karma lipyate nare. Normally it is thought that all action limits man. Okay? It does not stick to man. Okay? Action does not bind or limit the eternal, but we can go farther and say that action does not bind or limit our own true being at all. Okay? It never is. Your soul is never bound. It has got a freedom. It is free to be bound with the body mind life, or if it wants, it is free to lose its identification with body mind life. That's what the yogi is trying to do all the time. That's the first action. Okay? Has no such so. Action has no such effect on the spiritual person or Purusha. Action has got a result on the ignorant man, the superficial man, but not the spiritual person. Now the word person, PCAP, Swami is using he is using the word person as a self or the psychic being or Purusha, okay? Or on the psychic entity within us. It binds or limits only the surface conscious, surface constructed personality. Now he uses the word personality. Your constructed personality is body, mind, life. Who has constructed? Universal nature has constructed your body. Universal nature has constructed your vital, which is not so apparent. But the body is constructed by nature, very obvious. Everyone understands. Because it's a material. And everything being created in the material world is nature. Okay? It binds or limits only the surface constructed personality. This personality is a temporary expression of our self-being. Okay? Self-being, the substance of yours, when you go up, it becomes pure and clean. Okay? It becomes this personality, our body, mind, life, is a temporary expression of our self-being. When that pure substance comes down into the lower nature, it becomes clouded, it becomes a little dirty. So, again the image of the little mud in the glass. After some time, the mud settles at the bottom. The mud is your body, mind, life. And the self is the upper part of the glass where the water is absolutely clean and pure. Okay? So this is what Swami is saying. This personality, remember, because for clarity's sake, you must understand. Whenever Swami speaks of personality with a lowercase, he is talking of the body, mind, life. Okay? So this personality is a temporary expression, very obvious. Our body is born and dies. Similarly, our vital also is born and dies, and also the mind is born and dies at birth, and at death it disappears. It's temporary, a changing form of it. Another thing, it is not only it is born, but throughout life it is going on changing. Okay, it is changing in which way? Your body is growing, and the body becomes weak and becomes old, and finally there is death. But even our vital also is going on changing. You can grow, and you can also have more and more knowledge. The mind also is changing. So it is born, it's a temporary expression, it goes on changing, and finally it disappears. You are no more in time and space. Okay? So, empowered to exist by it. By who is empowering? The self is empowering the person is empowering the personality to exist. Okay? Dependent on it for substance and endurance. Temporary, but not unreal. While reading this sentence, suddenly something struck me, and I will tell you. The person, the reality has to exist, has to allow in the physical world, it has to allow. So, just now a thought struck me and I'll share it with you. When something is constructed without the aid of reality, it will disappear. Okay? Very good example is Pakistan and India. Okay? India, there is a soul. There is the mother, Bharat Mata. She is a reality, and that will ensure that India will exist in the physical world. But Pakistan has no such reality. It is just a construction, man-made construction. And if there is no reality supporting it, it is bound to disappear. Okay? That's the truth. It's very interesting. I have made a slight diversion, but this is the thing. Anything that is not supported by the reality will disappear in time. It is just a construction. Very interesting. Okay? So, there are many such entities which are built, but unless there is a reality behind it, it cannot last. Okay? There are many countries which are created by the Western powers. For instance, Israel was also constructed. For thousands of years, Israel did not, it had a reality as a race, but there was no physical entity, there was no personality, but it always had a person. So when the personality is created in the midst of in the Middle East, okay, it will last because there is a reality behind it. And the reality was there long ago without a personality. It's an interesting example, but this is what Shanghai is saying. Okay, so this personality is a temporary expression of our self-being, a changing form, empowered to exist by it. Note that. Just one phrase, but how much we can make of it. Empowered to exist by it. The personality is empowered to exist by the self, the reality. If that reality is not there, it cannot exist. Dependent on it for substance and endurance. Temporary, but not unreal. Our thought and action are means for this expression of ourselves, and as the expression is incomplete and evolutive, as it's a development of our natural being in time, thought and action help it to develop, to change, to alter, to expand its limits, but at the same time to maintain limits. Our mind, life and body definitely help us to grow. It gives us experience, but it is always limited. The limits go on becoming less and less, but there are always limits. That's what Swami is saying. Okay? Our thought and action, he's saying. Thought and action help it to develop. What is developing? The personality. To change, to alter and expand its limits. But at the same time, to maintain limits. In that sense, they are limiting and binding. They are themselves an incomplete mode of self-revelation. The body, mind, life are incomplete modes of self-revelation. But they are not absolutely unreal. Okay? So long as they last, they are real. But when we go back into ourselves, what does this mean? When we go back into, I added into, but when we go back into, no, when we go back into ourselves, into the true self and person, now he has not used a capital letter, but he is saying person, there is no longer a binding or limitation by the limits of action or perception. So when you identify yourself with the deep ocean or above, okay, then you are seeing the reality, and there is no longer a binding or limitation or ignorance by the limits of action or perception. Both arise as expressions of consciousness and expressions of force of the self, operative for a free self-determination of its nature being. So, Sandra is using very interesting words. Self-determination of its nature being. Which is the nature being? Body, mind, life. Why is he not saying body, mind, life? Because he is giving you extra information. Nature is building your body, mind, life. And what is being here? Take it as substance. Okay? Nature being. The substance which is there at the nature level, at the physical level. And that means your body, mind, life. For the self-unrolling. Self-unrolling. The self is up there, but it unrolls itself. It is condensed and it uncondenses itself, if you want. It oozes out and creates the body, mind, life. Okay? Self-unrolling. The becoming in time of something that is itself illimitable. Okay? The beginning in time of something that is itself illimitable. The becoming in time. The limitation, which is a necessary circumstance of an evolutive self-determination. Now look at the sentence. Again, you will see what I keep on repeating now. The limitation, which is a necessary circumstance of self-evolutive self-determination. The word evolutive self-determination is nothing but manifestation. So if you want to manifest that which is within you, there is necessarily limitation. That's what he is saying. It's a necessary circumstance. Manifestation definitely implies limitation. Might be an abrogation of self. Okay? An abrogation of self or derivation from self. In other words, what's the difference between abrogation and derivation? Abrogation means complete annulment of the reality. Or derogation, depends on the philosophy you are following. You can say, like the Buddhists, that the physical world is an abrogation of self. It completely eliminates the reality. Or you may say it's a derogation. That means it's a deformation. It's not absolutely unreal, but it's a deformation of the self from reality. Both these are philosophical statements. Abrogation of self, Buddhism, Mayavada. Derogation of self, Advaita philosophy. From reality and therefore itself unreal, if it altered the essentiality or totality in the being. Okay. It would be a bondage of the spirit and therefore illegitimate if it obscured by an alien imposition proceeding from a force that is not self. But there is nothing else but the Advaita philosophy, and nothing can influence it from outside. So it is a self-imposed limitation. That's what Sandra is saying. It's not forced to limit itself. It's a self-imposed limitation. It would be a bondage of the spirit and therefore illegitimate if it obscured by an alien imposition. If something is coming from outside, it is illegitimate, proceeding from a force that is not self, the consciousness that is the inmost witness and creator of our world existence. In other words, to reduce all the complicated, the divine is purposely limiting himself, hiding himself in what he seems to have created the opposite of himself. Okay? And from there he is escaping. We come back to the idea of the Leela. Okay? The inmost self, and that is the inmost witness and creator of our world existence. Or if it constituted something contrary to the being's consciousness of self or will of becoming. But the essence of being remains the same in all action and formation. Go back to the image of the sea and the surface of the sea with waves and the deep sea. The essence of being remains the same in all action and formation. Whether the sea is producing waves or whether the sea is calm inside, it is always the sea. That's the essence. The essence is the sea of being remains the same in all action formation, and the limitations freely accepted do not take away, take from the being's totality. Okay? The self, the reality remains the same, but it is pouring itself out into time and space and creating constructions which seem to be unreal, but they are not unreal, they are real in time and space. Okay, so that's what he's saying. Do not take away neutral. They are accepted and self-imposed. There you are. Okay, the divine is imposing the limitations on himself. He is covering himself up with thick substance and escaping from there. Not imposed from outside. It is self-created. Ignorance is self-created. Why? Because it's a game that's being played. They are a means of expression of our totality in the movement of time. They are an expression. Okay. Again, a poem is an expression of the poet. It's not the poet itself, but there is an expression. So the world is an expression of the divine. Okay. That's what he's saying. There is therefore no reason to conclude from the limitations of perception and action that the movement is unreal or that the expression, formation or self-creation of the spirit is unreal. The world is created by the spirit, and even if it is limited, even if it is form, even if it is finite, it is not unreal. It is coming from the, like the parents produce a child, the child has got something of the, he may be quite different, but he may be still, he'll have something of his parents. So the world is the child and the, the divine, the Satchidananda is the parent. So although it seems to be quite different, there is a connection. That's what Sadhguru is saying. All that is in the kinesis, the movement, the action, the energy in the physical world. The movement, the action, the creation is the Brahman. Okay? The sea is itself producing the waves. The becoming is a movement of the being. Becoming, action. Being, static. Okay? Time is a manifestation of the eternal. All is one being, one consciousness, one even in infinite multiplicity. Even when you see the multiplicity, it is only one always essentially. All the waves may be different, but they are always the sea. All our bodies, you are three of you out there listening to me, and I am the fourth one, all our bodies are matter. Okay? Essentially it is all matter. Exactly in the same way, this is what Sadhguru is saying. Whatever is there in the physical world, it is all essentially one. As Ramakrishna says, the reality is like a sea. When it is in motion, it's a physical world. When it is static, it's a self, the divine. Okay? All is one being, one consciousness, one even in infinite multiplicity. Even if you see infinite number of forms, it is essentially the same. And there is no need to bisect it into an opposition of transcendent reality and unreal cosmic Maya. But can we do that and call it quite legitimate? Yes. Swamdar says yes. You can say that they are opposites. You are not absolutely wrong, but there is no essential need. It is not something that you have to do. You can do the opposite also. That's what Swamdar is saying. Okay, we have gone 3 minutes beyond our time, so we stop here. A very big para, but essentially the gist of it is this. The world seems to be the opposite of the divine when you are in the world. But when your consciousness rises in the divine, you see that the world is an expression in time and space of the timeless and spaceless. But they are not unreal. They are real in time and space. We don't need to consider them unreal. Okay, that's it. So next week, in the philosophy of Shankara. We'll read that next time. Next week, Monday. Wednesday. That's okay.
Merci beaucoup.
Okay. In the philosophy of Shankara.
Yes, as well.
That's right. Au revoir, everybody. I saw that.
Thank you, Angada.
Okay, au revoir.